Mark Anthony Turno, and this is my creative writing tips. If you're an author looking to find ways of spicing up your world and making it seem more real, or if you're a reader just looking to see a few things behind the scenes or how to spot a better story than the rest, then this is the place for you. Each episode, I'll be giving a few writing tips of what it is I've been learning over the years in my career. To start with, you're probably going to want to know who the heck is this guy and what qualifies him to do what he does. I've been writing my own novels since 1996 and ghostwriting since 2010. Um, of my own novels, I've written over 30, including my Mulvine series, which is 13 books and 2 prequels. And even before I began writing that, I was 15 years planning it. So basically, writing is what I do. It's pretty much all I do. I think a lot. So with that, without further ado, my first writing tips. Everyone has a top 10 list, and so do I, and which means, of course, mine has to have 11 tips on it, which is actually in keeping with, I believe, number 9. That this is break the rules. Anyway, to get started, my first writing tip is turn off the grammar checker. No one talks as if they all came from Yale or something like that. There's no one in this world that speaks perfect English or whatever their particular language has to be. By all means, leave on the spell checker. Just the grammar checker for 2 things. Dialogue, it will not work. You want to show how people speak. And then sometimes, especially in my case, on descriptions, that doesn't always follow the normal rules of proper grammar either. Just look at any given piece of poetry. If you took a piece of poetry and stuck it at the regular grammar checker, it'd be blinking all over the place. So for purposes of what you're doing and telling a story, leave the grammar checker off. Everything you learned in high school English, that's pretty much about all you need. Keeping track of character details. Now there are some authors that use index cards, 3x5 things and whatever, and some people just write on the back of a napkin or something. I use a database because I have a science background. Probably forgot to mention that I have a master's in physics, amongst other things. And so to me, when looking at how to keep track of 25 characters in the first part of the first book, I actually thought of a database. It allows you to keep everything, all the details consistent. Like mine, for instance, I have fields for down to eye color, hair length, personality, about 19 different fields. I would rather have more information on hand than not enough. Now, if you don't know too much on databases, you can also do it for a spreadsheet. Just for me, a database is more natural. And then as you add characters, of course, you can add entries into that. It became essential for me because, like I said, the first Maldian novel had 25 characters. By the time I was finished, I had 250 entries. Index cards weren't going to make it, and also it allows you to do a searchable thing for any aspects of the characters. Okay, number 3, don't be afraid to innovate. All the earliest big name writers, Jules Verne, and all the others, they didn't go to writing school or find some creative writing course because they didn't exist. They pretty much, they were the innovators. They invented everything. So who's not to say there isn't something more to innovate and do differently? Basically, whatever works for your story, don't be afraid to try something new. And keep in mind that the classes, for a creative writing course being taught by some teachers, you get a college, you find the class there. Notice he's teaching the class, and probably not selling his own book. So by all means, it's basically teaching his opinion. So don't be afraid to innovate and try something different. An example I'll give from my own books. Opening line, chapter one of Maldine, I basically broke a few rules because I wanted it to sound more like an event, you know, something that you can feel. And so it would be classified as sentence fragments and or whatever, but it worked for the scene. So instead of just saying big lightning bolt cross across the sky, my opening line is distant crack of thunder, a portent of events awaiting the eccentricities of mortals. Sounds a lot more in the here and now, doesn't it? Anyhow, don't be afraid to innovate. Number 4, hate to say it, but imagination and creativity is a born gift. The one exception, you can't really learn how to be creative in a class. The one exception is during childhood, that's when it's born. You can, there are ways to exercise your inborn creativity, and part of it amounts to remove your own mental blocks. Because there's always going to be something in the back of your head. Well, I can't do this because, and as opposed to in the back of a child's head, they don't have that. They're willing to do anything. So creativity, for the most part, is a born gift, and then you can train it. If you find that you don't have that much creativity, and you're trying to write fantasy or science fiction, then in all seriousness, find a different genre. Find something that fits what you do. Number 5, outlining and prep work. I should mention up front, I've never had writer's block, ever. Part of the reason is I get it all out of the way beginning. Before I start writing any book, I outline. I take all the major beats, not necessarily a chapter by chapter thing. Like I could mention, hey, there's going to be a fight scene here that could be part of a chapter. That could end up being, 3 chapters. But I put down all the major beats for the book. I do other prep work as well. I take the aforementioned database and I stat up all the characters I figure ahead of time I'll be needing for that book. Especially in the Maldine series, every time I start a new book, and that there's always going to be more characters I need to add because I have them for different points of view and whatever. So I do all the prep work ahead of time, outline it, set up the characters, and then even as I'm writing, before I start a given chapter, the day before, I put down a more detailed outline for that chapter. It's for me, the outline is basically a bunch of bullet points. These are things I have to have covered in this chapter. So I get all the thinking out of the way ahead of time. So when I start fresh 7:30 in the morning to write a new chapter, it's all there in front of me and I can just really go to town. No one can really concentrate in total silence. For me, music helps. I tend to go for some exciting music, a lot of movie soundtracks, and things without any lyrics in them, because otherwise I'm paying more attention to the words in the song than the ones in my head. If you want a good example, the stuff I write to, there's a number of them, but anything by John Williams is good. Choose a type of music that excites you, maybe something appropriate to the genre. Like I do the exciting music because most of my writing, gets the blood pumping and everything else, and I have to keep my blood pumping. So, on the writing, the music helps, and there's sort of a quasi Zen thing too. How the monks have their singing bowls that they use to help focus on their meditations, because it activates the sounds of a certain part of the brain. The music, pretty much same sort of thing. I can go like 10 hours of typing with just as long as the music's going. Okay, and dialogue. If in doubt, say it out loud. Because remember, it has to be something that sounds like not only what a real person would say, but that particular character would say. So after you construct your sentence, if you're having doubts, just say it out loud. Does it sound like something that would be natural for that character to say? And if the character has an accent or a speech impediment or whatever, then by all means, spell it as close to the way you figure in the dialogue. Um, for instance, I've actually written accents. So it's not just to me enough to me to say, hey, he speaks with a given accent in there. Um, that doesn't bring it to life as much, or like just saying, have the dialogue and then saying he spoke it with a stutter or a lisp or something. Put that stutter or lisp in and then say it out loud, or say the dialogue out loud the way you would as that person. Listen to yourself carefully and then try to spell it that way. I have a character in one of my Flatfoot stories that he talks with a lisp, so that every S was an SH. So I'd write out all his dialogue and then go back and I'd swap out all the S's for SH's. Um, Mind you, when I ran the spell checker, it was blinking all over the place like a video game. But it's what worked for the character, and again, you double check by reading it out loud to make sure. Number 8, be adaptable. Outline or no, ideas will come up in the course of the writing, and this also goes back to, some people say, do you plan ahead to your plots or do you go by the seat of your pants? I do a bit of both. I've had several times when something just came up about a character that I decided to add to it last minute or switch around, and as long as it didn't violate my overall outline where the story was going, I'd go for it. I'd put it in there. I had one character that invented herself. It was going to be a one-off to show how nuts a certain character by the name of Poatter was, by having him drive this one person absolutely bonkers. But that character ended up staying, and it worked for the story, so I added. And next thing you know, you have a team that's sort of like Joker and Harley Quinn, only not nearly as well adapted. So by all means, be adaptable. Don't be afraid to tweak some of the details of your outline in midstream. Just as long as it goes along the same course you want to end up, but it might add a few things to your story. Number 9, break the rules, which is why this list has 11 points instead of 10. Acceptable word counts, 3x formats. A story must have a given protagonist. Whatever the official rule is, break them if you have to. Like some people talk about the 3-act story structure. Shakespeare had 5 acts in his plays. Television will have as many acts as they have commercial breaks. And a movie, basically whatever works for the plot. And the reason why Shakespeare had 5 acts, he needed time to physically change the scenery. So if you have a better way that works for your story, break the rules. And as far as what's an acceptable word count for a given story, I've always said every story has its own perfect length. There are some stories that will work good only as a short story, nothing more. And there are other stories that you can't tell in anything less than some big mega epic. So don't shoot for a given word count, shoot for what works. The rules, again, those first writers, they didn't have the rules. They're the ones developing things on what worked. And if you've ever seen any of those old Russian novels, they certainly broke all the rules on the word count, and they still sold a few books. So whatever works, whatever you need to do to get the story told in the way you want to tell it, break the rules. I mentioned that this, plot or character. Everything, and this overlaps a little what I said earlier. Everything in the story when I write has to either do with the plot or the character. In some cases, I try to work on both ends at the same time. So if it's something that's what the character is doing, or developing the character, or something laying the background for the plot, then put it in there. If you're looking at something and it doesn't really affect the plot or the character, then you may want to decide if it needs to be trimmed. Yes, I'll have a bit of world building, of course, especially in the beginning of a book when it's a new world. But that also ties in with the overall plot. And again, there are people that say, should something be plot driven or character driven? You need both. You can have the world's best plot, but if you don't have any characters there that can pull it off, it's no good. And you could have lots of character-based stuff, but you have to have a plot to hang them on. I've seen a few movies that would be otherwise good movies, and they had plenty of character stuff, but they were boring as heck because they didn't have a plot. There's one where the attitude on that is a bit like The Emperor's New Clothes when people talk about it, and that's Gosford Park. You're 2.5 hours, and an hour and a half in, it finally gains a plot. I want to claw my eyeballs out. So you need both plot and character for a story to work. There is no one's better than the other, period. And point number 11, which was a great one-liner I came up with that best describes, what it is that an author should shoot for, what is a good author should shoot for. In that they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. The goal of a good writer, the goal of a great writer, is to make one word worth 1,000 pictures. Example of that, Day at the Beach. I just said the beach. How many images does that conjure up in your mind? Of people crowding around there and with their beach blankets and everything else. Or maybe it's a more quiet beach with the local natives hanging around. Now, if I said the beach, 1890s, Day at the Beach in the 1890s, you have a different set of images. You have the guys wearing their striped long johns and those tents on the beach that they change into and everything. And I didn't say much more than that. So the goal of great writing is to make that one word worth as close to 1,000 pictures as you can. Well, that's all for today's writing tips. There will be more in the future. I have a bunch coming. If you want to know more, there'll be links and everything. You can go to my website, go to the station's website, find me, click me, share me, whatever. And of course, perfect example of how I write, it would be this. This has been Mark Anthony Tierno, and this has been my creative writing tips.